So we can get started. I'll start with just public comment. Anybody who has anything they want to share?
Jesse Heiser. I just had a question with regard to meeting recordings. I noticed the last several meetings have been recorded. Is there a way for the public to access the recordings? I think you can.
Yeah, the Mountain Field Community TV staff uploads them to YouTube and also or
I've been on the
audio's on.
site and MMCTV part for YouTube, but they're not there.
okay, I'm the chair of the board, so of the MMCTV board. And I'll ask in Galaxy, they have access to our cloud recording and recording cloud, and they just be behind, but the intent was that these would be uploaded.
Okay. That'd be great.
The select board meetings come up.
Yeah.
They were up like the next day.
Yeah, it's possible that there was miscommunication. I didn't realize they should upload these, but they're in the cloud. We keep things in the cloud for quite a while after the meeting. So we can get them up and we should.
Anything else? Anybody or on the phone? Any public comment? None. The review of the minutes from the last meeting. Anybody have any comments or changes to make? Didn't have any myself. So can we have a motion to approve them?
So moved.
In a second? A second.
Mhm.
All in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Seeing none, they're approved. Okay. Our next meeting is already scheduled for next Tuesday, the 30th at 7 p.m. Our fellow co-chair will be back and we will have an agenda to post again over the weekend, Friday, as soon as possible for that, based on what we get through today. We don't have any future meetings after that scheduled. I feel like we should probably wait for Denise.
True. Yeah.
And so
But she's taking off again
is she?
I have it at home, but mid-February, she's taking off again for another couple of weeks. So
Okay,
I would think early February.
okay. Do we, what do you think, Fran? You seem to know her schedule. Do you think we go ahead or do you think we wait till next meeting? What's easier for
We could
people?
sort of tentatively, I think she's leaving around the 16th, because she's a Meals on Wheels driver, so she sent me her schedule for that, and I put her on for early February.
Early February. So that brings us, we're having our next one on the 30th. So then you think that she'd then be available 2 weeks after that, which would be the week of the 13th. Is that Tuesday? Still?
I think so.
So do we want to tentatively say Tuesday, the 13th at 7 p.m.?
I think so.
Okay.
Oh, we may have to meet without her if she.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's noted. Okay. So then the next item is discussion on the Tuesday, the 16th select board meeting, follow-up summary and any discussion. From my point of view, I think we need to continue to move forward, remain positive and optimistic, stay focused on our end goal. And I know it's frustrating and I think we all are feeling that frustration. But I think we have to put our goal in sight and our mission in sight and stay positive. We're going to get there. Anything anybody else would like to say or feel about what happened?
Only the frustration of leaving a meeting and then having a different outcome afterwards, but I think that we still may not even know after March that we just have to keep doing. If we believe in what we're doing, we have to keep going.
Yep. Anybody else have anything that they would like to say?
No, I feel the same way. It's like we've put a lot of energy into this already, lots and lots of hours and I'm just, I don't know if it's my rose-colored glasses, but I'm still saying, yeah, just keep on plugging away.
Yeah.
With the plan at least, and then decide.
Yeah.
Where that goes.
Because there's more, I mean, that was focused on Browns Court. There's
There's
more
to it.
things that we need to do. There's going to be some major decisions relative to volunteers green.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Somebody's going to have to make.
Anything anybody else wants to say? Okay. Then our next couple items talk about Chris Haggerty's surveys. We have both that on Brownsport with his survey there, and we have the volunteers green survey of the band shell area. Have you had any updates further than the emails that we saw where he was working on them both?
I haven't had any other updates, and I wasn't sure whether I should send him another email or I don't want to keep
He mentioned
bugging
the
him.
end of this week, and so that's why I didn't expect you to have, but just in case you had
Yeah.
heard anything.
So I would say that if we don't hear anything by the end of the week, because we are having a meeting next week, maybe
Right.
we could ask him, but
And just to clarify for anybody, we're having the Browns Court survey. We've seen a tentative map of that. But that needs to be kind of solidified in terms of the usable space and where the drops off are and all of the acreage in order to better determine how best to align the items we're talking about and have John Lynn potentially tweak his imaging of that once we know exactly how big and how much space and how it lays and all of that from the survey. And then the Volunteers Green is we're doing a survey of the band shell area, that whole flat up there to see where it is in terms of the elevation, to determine if it's in the floodplain, if it should be out of the floodplain, how it actually sits, because if it's out of the floodplain, it changes potentially what the plans are. We sort of started discussing that at the last meeting in terms of a potential different layout of the park, depending if that's outside of the floodplain. It could change where we put the playground, where we have the structure for a pavilion or some type of roof building. And that could mean that the playground area goes back to being a green space. But we're kind of in a holding pattern on that as well, based on that survey and waiting on that. Just as kind of the background that happened at the last meeting.
Lisa, you need to mute.
Oh, sorry. I'm thinking out loud, too loud. See,
We're on here
Yes,
too.
thank you.
Sorry, I noticed that there's more down there. So those are what the surveys are. They're both being done by Chris Haggerty, and he has emailed saying he's tirelessly working on them both, kind of simultaneously. And like we just discussed, we'll follow up back with him at the end of the week. Like he kind of said he would have something to us, and the hope would be our next meeting next Tuesday. We would have something more solid for Browns Court and some type of idea on volunteer green is what I would hope. So those are kind of those two items, unless I missed anything that anybody else kind of talk about simultaneously.
No, well, I'll just add on the survey of volunteers green that beside if the elevations are right, then we would ask the town to apply for a letter of map amendment. I think I got that right, which officially would take the plateau out of the floodplain and allow us a lot more latitude on what we could do there. So that's important. And then the other thing was his survey will help them also to look at the band shell still. They need to know some of,
Mhm.
If we end up having to redo the band shell in any way, not take it down,
Right.
then they need the elevations as well.
Question concerning Browns Court
Mhm.
and the survey.
when we get the final survey, is it gonna be clearly marked exactly where the baseball currently is? Maybe with the outfield marked?
I don't know that it's gonna do that fully. I don't think that it will display it in that level of detail. I think that you'll take that then and potentially combine it with like John's display, design. He'll have a better idea then because it'll give him, topography. And then he can better see where the flat space is to know where the baseball field could start. And then the rest is kind of a measurement out from there, depending on how far out the outfield should be based on how the children or adults who are playing on it
Yeah.
respectively. So I think that it's kind of gonna be a combination. I think that the survey itself is gonna be more topographical in nature and measurements like that, and less so like this is where something within that space is, like the baseball field or softball field currently.
We'll know the boundaries, this belongs
Right.
to the town and this belongs to the neighbors.
And where those, drop offs are
Yeah.
here, those, ravines, so. That's why we kind of, once we get that, we can then reach back out with John and have him tweak what he had. Question. So then the next item for Brown's Court is kind of talking about a summary of what's left in order to have a discussion or a presentation to the select board on that individual park. We have a lot of the quotes for, the pickleball courts at this point. Jeannie's provided
Yeah, I have some
all of the numbers in terms of the benches and
amenities.
amenities and all of that.
I have some
um,
updates for that.
You have some updates. Do you want to go into that right now?
You want me to?
Sure.
Because we should probably
And I-
decide that we
go on
want
what-
two
yes, what-
benches, one
Yes,
picnic table.
exactly.
uh,
That, that,
And what, Jeannie's been sending me pictures, but I think everybody needs to see the pictures and say, okay, this would look great up there.
yeah. Yeah, so we had questions about a shed. And so I did ask John Artisan to put on, I said, put both of your hats on. And is that the shed that was there, we were wondering what it was. He thinks that shed is owned by softball, not by the town. And that they have, they keep the bases and the umpire gear and softball chalk, batting cages, all, rakes, all kinds of things in there. And I had just asked him several different questions. He said, if we did have a shed to use for pickleball or the store nets or tennis, whatever it is, that he thinks that there's a possibility. I guess Denise asked if they could be shared.
Mhm.
And it's possible, but we were talking and then Tess and I talked a little bit, the kinds of things that are going to be stored need to be stored over on one side of the court. I think that could be a much smaller shed that's stored
Yeah.
just basic supplies, and that the softball needs to be closer to the other side of the park. And so those are kind of heavy things that would be moved back and forth. So I still think a small shed close to the possible pickleball, tennis court, multi-use court, whatever it is still a good idea. And
Then you don't worry about having someone, it always happens when you share something. Oh, who took this?
yes.
Well,
Yes, and that's what and then, so that was another question I asked. He said, yeah, then he would have more questions about security because then you're having more people get into it. And we figure out how to have a lock system with a code or something on it, but the more people that you get to do that, and then if baseball has their things stored in one corner and some things are stored in another corner, it could be. It could probably be worked out, but, and he thinks the softball shed is still in decent shape, but there probably wouldn't be room for us to put anything in there.
we're then, to go back to just logistics, we're going back to talking about leaving the softball field in the orientation it is with the shed it has. Just updating it, upgrading it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the other shed would be over where we've laid out with the pickleball, bocce ball,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That makes sense, but
Yeah.
just to clarify, as we have the display we've shown
right.
has been with that a little bit changed for now.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, we do. And those are things that maybe, John could have on his, just
Yeah.
the picture, just have the outline of where a shed would be. And that's why we want to talk also about where, if we want benches or how many benches. But let me see, I think that's the only thing that I had about the shed. So it's whether, I had some rough prices. These were not quotes, but an 8x8 shed, 8x10 shed. It could even be like a 6x8 shed.
there.
And do we need to do that right now?
The shed maybe not, but I think the idea of how many benches we want like a picnic table and.
Yeah. So, yeah, it could
Other
be
piece-
somewhere.
With the shed is, the softball one has whatever security they've had, locking. Talking about how we manage that shed and
Yes.
who manages it and in what level.
Exactly. So Sherry Lynn is here from the Recreation Committee, and that's what I just had been, as we were writing up things, thinking of tasks or jobs that maybe
Mhm.
that's something that the Recreation Committee could be thinking about in the future. Would they be the contact person to have the key or the code or change the code periodically, whatever that might be? Sherry, because I forgot my computer, so I don't have the list of some things that I suggested. We talked about not that they would be a softball league, or a league or a bocce league or a tennis league, but the same way that the rec leagues kind of manage what goes on there. But yet we had also talked at another meeting that the rec committee, should be the ones to maybe just remind the soccer folks to get those nets off
Mhm.
at the end of the season. In the same way, they could be just overall maintenance, not maintaining the courts themselves, but making sure the shed is maintained, making sure the lock is. Thank you. It's great. So,
So is the thought that it would be like potentially locked with some type of code? And would that code be readily available to those of the public, such as potentially posting it onto the website? Where then it would take somebody more of an effort to go look for the code as opposed to somebody just causing problems, being able to open it right
yeah,
now.
and that's what I think, that's what I was hoping that with the rec committee, that if we say this is a good job for the rec committee, maybe they need to have some input on how do you think that would work? I could see just having the lock shed with brooms and rakes and court material, and there's the seniors who use the area for cornhole
Mhm.
could stay there. The library you can rent or borrow a cornhole game
Right.
from the library. Would that be a place with, if you borrow something, would we have a code there? I'm really not sure. Exactly. I was thinking the code could change seasonally.
Mhm.
A few key people, the heads of what groups want to organize the play, would have those things. The rec committee could,
Mhm.
if there's a contact person. The same, even things like checking the tables periodically, or the bike rack, or the water fountain. Speaking of water fountain, one of the things that Tess and I commented that we should have a hose connection there. Also, if we're gonna have water, but it needs some kind of locked hose connection, but so that if the ports need to be hosed off. And I know like at school, there's faucets all around, but you have to have a certain key to open up an outside faucet. You wouldn't want to just have a faucet there, but something like that. So I think that is something we should think to add there. And things, so Sherry, I don't know if you want to have any input about, you've even talked about that at all with your group about, how you could organize maintenance in some sort of way, or at least supervise it in a way.
Yeah, we just started having discussions about, but we haven't had them at a meeting yet, with the soccer leagues and the baseball leagues, and what kind of supports they may or may not need. So we were starting with the volunteers green area. And I actually am not that familiar with the Browns Court. So we can have another conversation on February 5th, but I do know that the organizations generally are the ones that are able to key in on Volunteers Green to different places. We've never been involved with that, as far as getting into the spaces there that have like the concession stand and all that jazz. The one thing we do look at is events that happen at Volunteers Green. So it would be trying to, rethink, because we've really done nothing with Browns Court. So it's not to say that the committee may be involved in some way, but I can't really speak for everyone. But we can, have a conversation. It might take a few conversations about that.
So, there's only a softball field there right now, so that's
Okay.
why it hasn't been much you would have to have. I mean,
I never even know what's going on there, to be honest. So, but I know you said you would be adding pickleball. And
Maybe.
do you envision that? I mean, the other thing is the only other thing that came to mind is, I'm just wondering, as far as what the town does for that kind of stuff. I don't know if they've had a role in the past, like Pete and others, or not, around the lock system or the keys. I think Duncan was the one that gave me the code to get into the concession stand for, we had some lawn games stored there. So I'm not quite sure what the town's crew does in regards to, have they ever done anything with Browns Court? I have no idea.
Well, there's only been the softball field there, so the softball league is, right now managed their games, their scheduling, their maintenance. Of course, the town, mows and.
They would do minimal maintenance, whatever, is up there, but
Not this,
not,
this.
no.
Equipment.
Okay. Yeah, and so are you thinking that the role is more about organizing access to the sheds that have the pickleball nets and things like that, or is it bigger
Well,
role?
Bigger.
Depends though, if you then potentially work with the library to have things checked out at the library, then
Yeah.
it could be. But
Yeah.
it'd be somebody would have to be maintaining that now we're still talking, we'll say pickleball courts. We've talked about multi-purpose,
could be
but like if we're talking about the pickleball courts themselves, then there won't be any nets or anything. It'll be paddles and balls for the pickleball
Yeah.
court, balls
Yeah.
for the bocce ball, like
Yep.
rakes and like, but not nets where you're taking them down and putting. That's where it becomes a bigger problem or a bigger task, a bigger ask if somebody's having to take those down and put them back up, which has always been our hesitation on the multi-use.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Sorry.
Did I just hear you say that you're worried I thought pickleball people bring their own balls
They
and
do.
paddle.
They do, but
And the nets would stay up for the season.
Okay,
That was
Well,
my
yeah, Tess-
understanding.
can I interject?
That would be your.
I originally, when I first came on this committee, Mike and I went down and did some quick measurements of the field. One thing that became apparent is that we were limited with space. We couldn't find an exact way to measure the outfield. We thought it was 225 to be on the safe side. Later, we found out it only had to be 200. At the same time, I was getting estimates, not estimates, but information from different towns as to how much it cost. Colchester in 2019 put in 4 pickleball courts. They are top of the line. There's no question about it. But the price blew me away. It was like 176,000. It was high. It was high. At that point, I kept on thinking, money is an issue here, because my original thought, I went in thinking, oh, maybe for, 140,000, we're gonna be able to get a tennis court and a set of, 4 pickleball courts. Totally off base. I had no idea. So money was the issue, space was the issue. In the meantime, I was hearing things like we're going to expand the parking lot, which is certainly needed. I was hearing snow removal place. So then I had to think about, are we looking at pickleball or are we looking at tennis? And my logic behind it was potential of 16 people for pickleball as opposed to potential of 4 for tennis at any given time. The other part of it was I did some research on the statistics, and I found out that pickleball is at an increase of something like 171%. This was from 2018 to 2022. There's always been a rumor that pickleball is what they call the old people's tennis. And I kind of want to dispel that, because the other part of the survey indicated that the largest growth was between the 18 to 44-year-olds. I think it was in 2022 is where pickleball as a whole grew 88%. So it was on the rise. But I was also, at the same time, Jeannie was talking to the gentleman from Compton. Is that the name of the?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
one of the playground representatives. That we were
and
talking
he suggested what they call multi-purpose
about. Right.
courts. And given that there were more people on the ARPA who wanted tennis as opposed to pickleball, I believe the numbers were, I want to say 39 and 24. It was in that vicinity. So I was on conference call when he talked about the playground equipment, and then very briefly I said, I have a couple of questions about multi-purpose courts, and we continued having the conversation. I did end up getting a quote from him, and from him, the price was $167,723. But that included, because when Jeannie was talking to him, I think she mentioned basketball. So there would be, I think, 2 basketball hoops there, 3 soccer hoops, and two pickleball courts. At that price, the price itself shocked me. But the other part of it is that the dimensions of the court that he gave me were something like 57 feet by 101. And I don't know if there are any tennis players out here, but everything I have heard, it's that the minimum for a tennis court should be 60 feet by 120. I contacted him and said, what about doing 4 pickleball courts? And the response I got was, then you're getting into custom building. So
Right.
I've gotten pictures, I've gotten quotes on him. That's all I can say.
Another thing to add about your 160 is you also mentioned that didn't include any excavation or,
I'm sorry.
you said that the 160 also didn't include any excavation or
Yes,
just
thank you.
to add
Thank you.
that piece.
This particular company did not include any excavation cost. Thank you. I too didn't. I just have my little handwritten notes here. I also have been talking to a gentleman from a place called Sport Court Northeast. And he is again, he's receptive to the whole idea. This time I asked him about specifically 4 pickleball courts, 1 tennis court. And the price on that was $154,047. Okay. That did include the excavation cost. What it did not include were the portable pickleball nets. Okay. That, and I'll get back to that in a little while. The very first
Tess, you're talking, when you said 1 tennis and 4 pickleball, are you talking
I'm
Together
talking
or separate? I mean,
together.
as a
It's
multi.
all on one,
Yeah, I
it's
just
all on
wanted
one
to-
big
yeah,
pad,
a
but the
multi-
courts,
Yeah.
but the courts are marked. The very first person or company that I spoke to was Vermont Tennis Resurfacing, and they were the ones in St. Johnsbury. Their price for, and again, I had asked them for 4 pickleball courts because that was one of the very first people I was talking to. But I did mention that there was a possibility of tennis. He gave me a quote of between 110,000 and 115,000. This would include the excavation. It would include all of the markings, the fencing, what we call the divider line. On the picture, you can see that you have the 2 pickleball courts. That black kind of net that's between those 2 sets, that's considered the divider line. It's protection so that the ball doesn't roll from, say, the front court to the back court or vice versa. And again, you know, those posts for the nets are permanent. The nets would be taken down during the winter.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
but-
if you're going with just a straight pickleball court or a straight tennis court, they're up there for the season, but taken.
Okay, and the paddles and balls are up to the people who are playing
Paddle.
pickleball.
Paddles and balls, people bring their own.
Right.
People
There's
bring-
no reason we have to worry about a shed to store these things in.
Well, if we get into, and I'll talk a little bit, I think I sent pictures, I'm not sure if you had a chance to download them, because I sent them this morning.
Hold on.
Okay. If we get into like the multi-purpose of where we have a tennis court and 4 pickleball courts or 2 pickleball courts, then you would have to store the pickleball nets. Okay. That's where that's coming from.
Thank
And
you.
it's also not just the nets. It'd be like any of the maintenance things you need, the brooms, the rakes, the shovels, the repair, little things that you do to repair, the paint to touch up the lines when it needs it. So it
Just
doesn't have to
stuff.
be a big massive
Right.
place, but
Just
they
be a small
definitely,
shed.
yeah, to just
Okay.
for general
Can't
maintenance.
roll up, I would assume.
One thought I have, which would be talked about later on, once we have pickleball courts in the works, would be having an organization like there's a soccer organization and a baseball organization that kind of manages pickleball courts. And they might be responsible for checking out the maintenance, scheduling, making sure that it is open. If I today at 10 o'clock want to go play pickleball, I want to know that I can do that. But if they want to have sort of organized leagues at any point, that's all worked out. So there's still free time for people to just go, but also maybe some organized playing.
Right.
And they could possibly take over some of the responsibility of the maintenance, just like the gentleman, when the 2 gentlemen were here a week ago talking about bocce, where in Burlington, they kind of have an organization that manages the bocce.
Like we do
courts.
with the baseball,
Mhm,
or the softball, whatever.
mhm.
I think the key is though with something like that is we need to also ensure that it's not just like a group who has
Right.
all the time.
Yes,
Right.
Who
that,
then can just, because the whole point is it's supposed to be widely available to
Right.
everybody. And so we're not creating a pickleball court, bocce courts for a league
Right,
in a
no.
league alone.
right,
So
absolutely.
If
yeah.
we do have a
exactly.
league who takes over and is the managers of these things, it's ensuring that they're required to have
Free-
time allotted for open play. And so that's sort of what I was talking about with the paddles and balls, was I didn't know if it was a good idea to work with the library like they do with the snowshoes for novices who don't have these things. They could rent them at the library, you know.
They
Mhm.
want
I
to
wanna
try
take
it
my
out.
boys to go learn how to play and give it a try. And then if I ruin them, I've checked them out at the library and I have to pay for them. That's the way it goes.
And that's why the recreation committee who organized the snowshoes and have
Right.
those there.
That's
That's
where my
why I
thought
think
was
they would be
coming
a
from.
key part to the, I
Mhm.
mean, our task is to get this off the ground or to recommend to the select board what it is. But then we need to be assured that there's somebody gonna
Manage it.
continue to take care of this. And that's why I was talking with Sherry and the committee about, what would their bigger role be? And so I think it could be a bigger role, and it could just be, if it ends up being a shared court,
Mhm.
then it's okay. Monday, Wednesday, Friday is tennis, Tuesday, Thursday's pickleball, or however it might be, to get somebody started and going. But I totally agree that then a league
Yeah.
should be able to, and there are management systems and tools, online tools, and
Yeah,
Bocce ball folks were mentioning how interested they're, they could help or whatever. And so I'm sure there's a group of pickleballers who
Mhm.
would do the same thing. So I have the displays, by the way, of your
Oh, yeah.
multi
this is,
course.
this is.
You want me to pull a different one? I have
Okay.
them all.
This one came about, I did finally make contact with another, what I would call it, the traditional court company. And that one is called Vermont Recreational. They are in Monroe, New Hampshire though, but they did start, I believe, in McIndoe Falls. Again, I asked him for a quote for either the 4 pickleball courts or the one tennis court. We did have a conversation. I've been talking frequently with the receptionist, and I think that they have been so busy and short on time that it just took a while to make the connection. So a couple of weeks ago, I happened to call middle of the afternoon thinking, well, I hope I get somebody. And lo and behold, he was there. She said, I'm going to connect you. And then she came back and said, he's going to have to call you back in a few minutes. And he did. And so when we were talking, he said, what is it that you really want? And I said, I'm just the information giver here. Given my druthers, I make no bones about when I filled out my application to be on this committee that I'm a pickleball person. So he did give me a quote for the 4 pickleball courts. It came in as $125,211. For the tennis court, he gave me a recommendation or an estimate of $123,900, but that also had 2 pickleball courts on it. Okay. I then got on the internet and said, well, if you can do 2 pickleball courts, you should be able to put 4 pickleball courts on it. So I did find this. It's not exact because our courts wouldn't have those diagonal edges. It would be a true rectangle. It would be right angles at it. And the red is your tennis court. The blue lines are your pickleball courts. This red horizontal line that is here. Okay. This is your tennis net. It serves as that divider between the two pickleball courts. You don't want to have back-to-back pickleball courts without some kind of a divider. You don't want that ball coming in from somebody from behind. All right, so this is something that I presented to him. This is all happening. Today's what, Tuesday? This was basically happening yesterday. Okay, so there was a quick exchange here. My last one was with him this morning, and it was basically saying, can this be done? We haven't talked about quotes or anything like that, but he tells me that it can be done. Vermont, I'm going to go back to Vermont tennis, which was my original one, and I felt that it would only be fair that they be asked the same question. So I sent it to that gentleman, and he said, yes, it could be done. He had some concerns that this part right here, the section in here, which is just kind of in between the courts, he felt that was narrow. He thought that maybe an extra 4 inches I think I discussed this with another multi-court person, and that was his concern as well. And the bottom line was, it depends on how aggressive the players are, okay? For somebody like me, okay, this would suffice. If we're looking at a younger crew, which is what I'm really hoping for, I'm hoping that this becomes accessible to people of all ages. If you're looking at the more aggressive player, it's not uncommon for people to run outside of the ball hits. In here somewhere, it would not be uncommon for a person here to run over here because they have a stronger forehand for their backhand. It just wouldn't be uncommon. It would be a collision if at the same time. So that was his recommendation. He came right out and said it. Other people said that's a little on the narrow side. His suggestion was to say, have this as being 64 as opposed to 50. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm at on that. And I don't know if my PDF file came through.
If you want one of these.
It was one.
This one, oh, this one.
That on the
This
screen
one,
test?
is that one, if I can get it bigger?
Yes,
That's
yeah,
one, okay, let me.
Yeah. This one, when I first looked at it, it's really a busy diagram. I first looked at it and I thought, what is he doing? And then I realized he was showing me each course separately. This would be the final. My personal opinion is too many lines. I also, and I just barely got this one.
So the two yellows,
I think this is basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so the two yellows look like they're pickleball courts, the red looks like it's a tennis court, and then the black is a basketball court.
So, those are the configurations that it came up with. I think you could probably drive yourself crazy with all the configurations that you could do. I don't know what I know that on the ARPA survey, basketball courts, they came after the tennis and the pickleball. I don't know, like, if people who answered the survey were saying, I'd like a basketball court at the green, or whether,
Generally didn't,
pardon?
they didn't really.
Yeah. So I don't know, because there are courts, behind Camel's Hump. I just didn't know. And the same thing with there was another picture from the first from Copman that included soccer. And again, I didn't know if maybe we didn't. I think we have a lot of soccer fields.
No, we don't.
It's a
Necessary.
small field, folks.
Yeah.
How much can you shove in there?
No,
Yeah,
all on the
see-
same court. This
Oh,
was
I
the soccer
understand.
nets
But
are
see,
the
that-
ends, but
that's-
then it's, right,
All
it's
from
scheduled.
calmness.
That's just,
You're-
that's,
Yeah, yeah.
The
That-
management of something like that,
yeah,
and you have
Yeah.
to take a tennis. If you have to take nets down in order,
Yeah.
for what, to move from one sport to the other.
Right.
On your first diagram, I was a little concerned about the tennis net
yes.
is not very high. And I know, though I haven't played pickleball yet,
Yep.
that some of the pickleball players are pretty aggressive, and that also, even when I'm playing tennis, I've been managed to hit the ball way out of the fence around the
Yeah.
tennis court. So it would seem like, that a tennis net would not stop a pickleball
Wouldn't.
from going from one court to the other.
The bigger concern, I agree with you that it's not that high. The bigger concern is the ones that roll.
Would go under the net.
Right.
And then somebody could step on.
Stuff on, yeah.
So I think this is something we've talked about. And so just to circle back for anybody new is we're looking at these to ensure that we look at all of the options.
Yep.
Right.
Mhm.
But we've also talked about our concerns in previous meetings that I want to mention in having a multi-use court. it would be great in terms of hitting all the different demographics, but it creates a scheduling nightmare that somebody would have to plan for this, because if, say, we look at the original plan that had the 4, if one group is playing on one of the pickleball courts, you can't be like, sorry, you guys all need to leave because I'm gonna play tennis, and vice versa. And then with the multi-use courts, you have to be pulling things down and re-putting them up. And we don't want just anybody pulling these nets down and putting them back up, because they get broken, and then how much do they cost? You know, and how often would you be doing that if they were having to be put up and put down daily because somebody wants to play tennis or somebody wants to play pickleball? And that's when we got into more of the discussion of the shed and how to get that accessible to everybody that so needs it, while still maintaining that equipment at the appropriate level to be useful. Because if you break the tennis court net, then it's gone and somebody has to pay to replace it. You know, those types of things that become a much bigger endeavor, and you have to create a schedule, and somebody would have to be in charge of the schedule and signing out the court and then enforcing that and all of that. And that's the type of thing we've kind of talked about with these multi-use courts in prior meetings as well. I don't know that we're fully saying like done with the multi-use courts, but I just think that it has a lot of things that would have to be figured out if that's the route that we would need to go, and we would obviously need somebody to be willing to do that. This committee is a short-term setup committee.
Right.
Somebody would have to then be willing, whether that be the rec committee or somebody else, whoever they may be, to do I say maintenance, but it's not maintenance in terms of like necessarily upkeep, but
It's
scheduling the
Scheduler.
little.
a kind of maintenance, and a town like Williston has a rec department.
Yes,
and-
yeah.
and
That's
they
what I
have-
was gonna mention, yeah. You know, that whole thing is about having a department or a staffing, you know, that sounds very complicated.
Right.
I think at some point in the very near future, we have to just say we're either gonna go with multi-use or we're gonna just focus on pickleball.
Well, and I think when we get to we'll say, we're gonna call it our budget, right? Our budget discussion,
Yeah.
but it's not a standard budget, you know, but
Yeah.
the money of it, the $450,000, I think that we're gonna find that it's going to have to be that $200,000 just for this multi-use court, with all the other things that we're talking about, a $200,000 playground,
Yeah.
if we don't get the grant, that's almost all of it.
Yeah.
You know, and so we're gonna have to kind of do some of this, and I think that some of it'll come down to that discussion and saying like, we'd rather do a pavilion at, you know, Volunteers Green, or redo the playground at Volunteers Green, or the redo the parking lot. Like, all of these things are gonna add up, and there's gonna have to be kind of cuts, and there's gonna have to be logistical reasons why we're choosing those one versus the other. And that's what we're gonna have to be prepared to present,
And
is how we came to that decision that this is the final plan. And so I appreciate that we're having these conversations and able to kind of talk the pluses and minuses, right? Because that's the due
shows a
diligence.
more complicated situation
I
that
just-
the town would be in if we did multi-use.
And that's not what we're not trying to make this future complicated for everybody.
One of the things that I thought of, there should be a sign right at the court. One of the things that other towns do is to, first of all, on their sign, they include the hours that people are allowed to play at. Some are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m, some are 8 a.m. to 8. It varies. That's a discussion that would have to take place at some point, not now, but that is something that we need to be considerate of. The other thing I was thinking of, and most courts will say this as well, if people are waiting, limit your time to.
Yeah.
And I think some of them are like 1 hour, 1.5 hours.
Mhm.
Yep.
If we went with a multi-purpose, and it doesn't have to be this, even if it was just tennis and pickleball. Jeannie and I had discussed about, maybe doing alternate days, 1 week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for tennis, Tuesday and Thursday for pickleball, the next week alternate it. Have Saturday and Sunday be open play. So whoever comes in first, gets to play. To utilize it, say if I come in and I've got 3 people and we want to play a game of pickleball, but it happens to be a tennis game
Mhm.
and no one's playing tennis. I think you should still be allowed to play pickleball. You may as well use the courts, but with the stipulation that if a tennis player comes, we're done. We're out. Your pickleball is over because that's their designated day. It's all about, for me, it's all about accessibility.
But then you have to move them before that tennis player can play tennis. He has to move the pickleball.
The pickleball net, taking apart and putting those pickleball nets together is a question of 5 minutes. Okay, they're not difficult. They're not difficult. The senior center has been doing it for 8 years and they go up pretty quickly. They're snap-in kind of things.
But
The
then
first
again, do you want everybody taking down and putting up the net?
well, that's a concern. I think the last
So it's a
time,
novice.
I think
know,
at one of the select
there
board
with-
meetings I mentioned.
Okay, go, kids, help me out
But
here.
I
Like, it doesn't always work out well. Opening it up to anybody that to
Yes.
be putting it up and down. A group who's regularly playing tennis, obviously, we would feel more comfortable saying, go ahead and build it, put it up.
Yep.
So-
I think one of the things that I did get
Yeah.
a quote from, I believe one of the
we'll be right there,
multi-purpose
John.
things, that their price for their portable nets was atrocious. And I'm thinking, why? When I can get it on Amazon and buy a pretty stable net for about $200 roughly, okay? I think my husband and I sat down and talked about this. We're thinking if we had a storage shed, we stored those nets in there. Don't lock the thing for the first year, but don't spend a whole lot of money on those nets and see how it goes. If at some point there are issues with it, then we say it would need to be an under lock. I think on the sign too, that there should be something like, please check the website for, is this a tennis day or a pickleball day? And I think maybe if we could have, on our town government page, maybe under the recreation department, that link.
Which is why I didn't know if it made the most sense to potentially lock it up and just have the code out there, have it be public record. It just takes that extra step
Yeah,
somebody to need to do. And if you're taking the extra step to go look for it, you're more likely to take care of the stuff than if it's just open.
Yeah.
And that was just my only comment. No, just to jump to John's question. John asked, shouldn't a final decision on multi-purpose courts be made after getting public input and finding out if the rec committee will manage the court? On the second part of your question first, I think that's the continued discussion that Jeannie and the rec committee are going to be having at their next meeting. And so we'll know whether they're willing to undertake that or not in the coming meetings after that, I would say.
They need more members to be able to even do that.
Exactly. They're a very
Yeah.
small committee.
And this is all based on the field being a total rec field.
Yes.
Well, yes.
So that, I know you're not, but your maps and whatnot.
All based on it being rec. We have no,
Okay. Thank
if
you.
we get told otherwise, then we get told otherwise. Until then,
Well,
it is
doesn't
all
seem
rec.
to matter what we're told, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I also think that, or maybe you want to answer
go-
us, the public input part, that's what we're we're trying to get we're trying to educate ourselves a little bit, before we can open
can
it up.
answer all the
Like,
questions.
we wouldn't have had any answers to these questions
Yeah.
if we didn't have this discussion, but I think we definitely, that is our plan to get public input, and that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about, how we might be able to go about that and
Right.
how we will be
Mhm.
able to gather that information. But you're absolutely right, John.
So those were kind of the logistical main items left, in my opinion, on Brown's
Yeah.
report.
I have,
For the moment.
Benches.
beside benches and table, could you put John's backup, layout?
His layout, yeah.
Yes, please. So, assuming we're going with courts of some sort, and we had talked about, cedar trees
Mhm.
as a
Yep.
barrier. So my thought would be that, assuming it's to the north, you'd have cedar trees along the north side of the pickleball courts there, and then maybe some down the east side.
Here,
No, but just by the pickleball courts,
okay,
just,
right here.
you're trying to deaden the
Yes,
noise of
right
the
there, you got it.
pickleball, so.
Kind of around
That's
both
where
sides.
the most neighbors are, but
Mhm.
you have to have them far enough away from the courts
That it
that
won't-
people can maneuver to
Mhm.
get in and out of the courts.
And I think we have to remember that the baseball diamond or the softball diamond is now over here. And so that kind of goes this way. And that means that potentially then this remains here, I think is what we were initially talking,
Mhm.
right? But there may be space then for that to move over some. And I know that these folks over here mentioned potentially the need for cedar trees and whether that should be over on this side as well. Thoughts on that?
Do you by any chance have a picture of where
It
It's-
currently is.
the way it is currently?
You can see the little bit of it. Let me see. Hold on. I'm gonna stop sharing because I get into my email. I never know. Let's see.
I think we even had the field even being a little smaller than 200 because of who's playing softball.
Yeah, it's
There.
the middle school girls.
Yeah.
So they don't have,
Yeah, no, they're not gonna hit it 200 feet.
And you're still thinking that orientation will go the way John suggested, or is that waiting, we gotta wait for the survey
I
to
think we have to wait till the survey.
know where the space might be? That was
It's
we turned it the other way on that because
There,
we
yeah.
just weren't sure, of the,
Okay.
Yeah, if you look on Google
Space.
Maps,
Yeah,
There it
right
is.
here.
Google Maps is pretty good too.
The same kind of view of it, but just showing where it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we're thinking of your courts and.
Yep.
here,
Right in this
And
kind of,
possibly doing bocce,
Over
I
there.
want to say,
there's one over here.
That's where you walk the dog.
Mhm.
And snow, the other day, my neighbor was out snowshoeing with her
yep.
dog.
I do that there
That,
often.
that's,
Dog wearing session.
yes,
They make them for that.
they tied it around. No, I don't know, but she was. And it was, her leash was tied around her. And she was hoofing it, so you need that
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
And just a couple of things about the bocce. What was hard was with the survey that was being done, a lot of the requests were for big pieces like the pickleball courts. I acknowledge that pickleball tennis takes up a lot of room. The only thing I could find that is something that we could fit if we wanted to were things like bocce. Somebody did say, I don't know if it was on the ARPA lawn games or whether it was the one that the rec department did.
I don't believe the long game for mentioned on the bus, but
Okay,
Well, they can play long games on the softball field.
Right.
Right.
If they're not playing
But-
softball.
but I didn't even know what, I mean, I consider bocce a lawn game.
Well, in my yard, it's, but yeah.
And that's, we were talking about where did that initial push for bocce come
Yeah.
up, other than, and maybe Sherry can answer that. I don't know if people had come to the rec committee, Sherry, asking about bocce, if we had, had a discussion.
They,
Just
we were
seemed to
saying
come up from
where-
the start. I don't
Yeah,
know.
They
when
have-
we were where we were.
there have been people approaching the rec committee looking at
I
the,
thought I thought the bocce came, was it not on the ARPA committee? We did a survey like 3 or 4 years ago. It could have been on that survey, but I don't know why I was thinking the ARPA committee. It wasn't a lot of people, but I do remember seeing it on either both or one of those surveys to residents.
I know Jack.
Jerry, I think the reason we got the bocce for the library is just because that's what they suggested. I just asked them what they wanted for us to purchase for the library. And
Oh, okay. So that's
a
Kate.
good lawn game.
Okay, so Kate worked with the library. I forgot about that. So yeah, that was their request. And again, do you remember, Kate, if they had people asking about it, or they just said that would be best?
No, I don't think, not that I know of. I don't think they had people asking about it. I think they were just
Okay.
interested in having some games that people could use
Yep.
on the lawn next to the library.
Okay. Yeah.
When they're there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Kate. Kate's
Yeah.
co-chair. So
Up on the call. Martha, you were up first, your hand.
Yeah, the seniors play bocce. I don't know if we spoke up and said we wanted it, but yeah, it's a pretty popular lawn game as far as before, but we really would love to have the court too.
Mark?
Hey there. I definitely recall bocce coming up more than once, if not just through the senior center, then through some of those surveys or requests. Because and if not, then I would like to make the formal request myself, because it's so if no one else is registered, which I'm pretty certain that they have, and we could go through the numbers. I don't know exactly what they would be, but bocce seems like a good sport. It's nice, easy. It's outdoors. Does take a bit of an investment, but I think it would have payback and bring people in too, which is one of those other perks we're looking at, not just locally, then something that can draw people from other towns.
Thanks, Mark. The other thing that to throw a monkey wrench in, or a discussion point, is we all keep talking about the softball field and it remaining there. And whether with our potential different layout at Volunteers Green, whether there's the ability to bring that down there in the area where the playground is, if you call that a structure, and substantially changing it. We talked about it with the volleyball versus basketball position.
I don't think it, well.
Because then it opens up the ability to put more of these types of things, up there. Just to.
Right. I personally feel that the Browns family donated that land with the intent for it to be for softball and baseball. And I, for one, feel that should be honored.
And I also think the reason I really, after seeing that playground the last two floods and other floods, I just don't think not only should not a playground go in that exact space, but nothing should go there other than green space. That would be a great place for the farmers market, because they're take up and put down in a day. I think more of those things, like events like that, could go there.
It also,
It's going to depend if we have the plateau. Is that what they're? Yeah.
Right.
You know, if we
No,
can
there's a whole
do
lot of
that,
depends,
then-
but I just feel like we should
Yeah. It's a
talk about all the
yep,
pieces
absolutely.
and not just make assumptions. And
So-
I'm not saying I also want to do that. I
No.
just want to make sure that
Yeah,
we're
it's good.
talking about all of the assumptions we're making in making a plan. So that's all.
I also like the looks of the green space that's
It
involved
does
with
still allow there to be a lot of green space
baseball.
for people to use in other ways that is not necessarily
Yeah.
whatever the surface is of
Yeah.
all of these courts. But just wanting to make sure we had talked about it and not just kept moving ahead with
Yep.
leaving a softball field and not talking about it.
The seniors also play croquet.
Mhm.
And they can go out on the softball field and play
Outfield
and
for
set up their croquet nets. Or wickets. Nets.
It's a wild.
Perfect. So, with that being said, then we're currently talking about under all of the assumptions we currently can make. Softball field remains here, then a bocce ball court would be over here. Pickleball / multi-use, depending on what we decide, would be in this corner. Cedar trees. And were we just potentially doing one bocce ball court at this point is what I think we're talking about, right? Oops.
Well, we were thinking about, on John's thing about doing
Two, but they would be together. It would be
Right,
like
back
a-
side by side, but is this space, I don't know that this was left big enough to do two side by side based on the measurements that,
we'd have to look
we
at
had
the other.
here, which were 13 by 81, this space. So you can see the light line. I don't know that this space is big enough for two of these
Sure.
side by side. So just putting that out there as well.
Down by,
Yeah, that's not the way the baseball field is right now, is it?
No, this
No.
is,
See, but you can see the slight line of it. See that here is where see, this is home plate. You can see it there, which is the same imaging of here. This is that same line.
Oh, okay.
Just to kind of give measurements. So right now we're talking one bocce over here, softball field here, pickleballs.
and
cedar.
possibly one bocce down,
You could do one over here potentially. I know
down
that's not long enough.
right there.
Still right here, but with the court going this way. Okay. Perfect. And then our parking lot. So when we go to do a new design, we had kind of pre-talked about where we thought things would lay out. Okay, so then the bocce ball courts would be separate and one would be all the way over at the softball field. So when we're talking about the shed, now, were we
can bring
thinking about
your own.
having bocce ball
Right, bring your own.
supplies or bring your own
Bring
for the
your own.
library situation again?
Bring your own.
They have to
Bring
bring
your
your own too, but yeah, the library would be a place where somebody could borrow a set.
So we're just talking about the fields or the courts for each of these.
Yeah. And again, there was some definite maintenance material. That's why I mentioned like the hose. They keep gravel to fill in divots or whatever, something he was explaining how the
Yeah,
bit of
yeah.
maintenance that they do. So you do need some maintenance
I
equipment.
know. I can find it.
No, you're fine. Please go ahead.
We're talking about, do we know about the water lines under there being in good condition
We were told it's ready to put a water fountain there,
and,
hookups, ready to go,
okay,
right under the ground that,
pipes are sufficient?
Yeah.
Because if they put homes in there, those pipes won't be sufficient.
Oh, no.
No,
we are in
We're
no
not-
way
yeah,
commenting
we're
on whether there's putting homes there.
With the pipes.
we just knew there was enough for water fountain.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a water fountain.
So if there's a water fountain, I'm hoping we can put a hose connection
Okay.
there. That was much.
Yes.
That's the only.
They're
Yeah.
silly questions, but.
Yeah.
No,
No.
so,
And benches, so when.
yep,
we decide how many,
do
yeah.
we want to put, Mark, go ahead, please.
Oh.
Gosh, I wasn't expecting on you to call me so quickly.
Sorry.
But I'm
Before
at
we got into
dinner.
the next couple of benches, I figured I'd let you go.
I was just wondering about the dimensions behind home plate. You're talking about putting in a water line and whether there's any possibility to maybe put a announcer's booth or over a concession stand or storage area directly behind home plate, which would have the plumbing fixtures to support the bocce court, but also have the potential for other uses.
So first, the plumbing itself is over here. And again, we're not talking about having the layout be this way anymore. It's gonna go back to where it currently is. We were told. We initially didn't know why it had changed, and I believe we've come to find out that it's because of the sunlight and things like that. So it's our display when we finally go for final is gonna be with it back to having it where it sits now. So over here. My understanding is the water fountain situation is over here in this corner. So for that's not really the same spaces for an announcement. We have not talked about doing anything of that nature. However, I think it kind of goes beyond what we will end up with the funds for, with the least potential public overall benefit, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Other people can chime in as well.
Well, and the softball field is not really the main field that they use for, it's be more baseball that would have more attendance, and they really use Volunteers Green more for that kind of thing where you would want an announcer's booth.
No, I get that, and that's certainly something we might want to consider if we've got the pre-existing structure down on the Volunteers Green. Is upgrading that building and putting a second floor announcer's booth up there. But really what I was just looking at is ultimately is, concession stand and restrooms like we have down at Volunteers Green. We haven't made any concessions for restrooms, and honestly using porta potties is, if we could avoid that and install some sort of permanent structure, we've got to build a shed anyways for some storage, then restrooms and water fountains and that type. I mean, I don't know how much more it's going to cost to run the line from one side of the bocce court over to the other, even if it's not behind home plate anymore. I get that, but still some sort of structure on this park area that provides for public restrooms.
There a porta potty there in the summer,
Yeah,
Dana, do you
usually
know?
a porta
Yeah,
potty.
that's.
Yeah, we
been
talked
there
about it
for
on
years.
It's getting a lot more use though now. I mean, that's just sure it's functional enough for an occasional softball game and dog walkers, but you throw in 4 pickleball courts, a couple bocce courts, and a more developed softball field, I can see a lot more use. And we need storage anyways. We need some sort of structure there. Let's put it in with some plumbing.
It's already
Go ahead,
a
Jay.
problem with
Okay.
the Volunteers Green.
My turn.
Yes, sir.
The thing is, we don't have the money. We just simply don't have the money for a structure of that size. If we're looking at how much a shed would cost, and we're saying, what, $8,000 for a shed? So you don't have money for a permanent structure with bathrooms, even though it would be awesome to have that. One thing I'd like to ask about is bleachers.
Mhm.
I would love to see bleachers at Volunteers Green, but I've been told emphatically, no ifs, ands, or buts, Arizona officer, we cannot even put in temporary removable bleachers. But up here we can,
Mhm.
although I'm not a carpenter, but it seems like we could throw bleachers together with just some planks and some wood. It would be nice to have that though, so when people are watching their grandkids play, they got this to step.
I'm working on prices for those.
Terrific, thank you.
Was anything else you wanted? Is that
No, I just-
okay? Before
I
I
just-
leave.
Yeah, I'm just hoping we went with bleachers.
Okay. So then you're getting pricing on that, and then we'll have that for the
Yeah.
final model. So then that brings us to benches and the picnic table.
Yeah, it's just, I had some general prices last time, and I'm waiting for prices from, one of the playground reps, that with Pettinelli, just to see if there might be some other pricing other than the company that we're going with, looking at benches for the round church that we'll talk about at some point.
Mhm.
Those benches match what's already there.
Yeah, the metal, the
Yes.
fancier
Yeah,
looking.
right,
I don't
yes,
think that
and
that's what we
the
need up
IP
here.
wood that, right, so I think that we could probably find some, maybe some more reasonably priced, and I was just looking at some different steel benches, but I don't know if you wanted to see pictures. if we want just 2 benches or 4 benches, I would think that maybe, you know, a bench at each end or by the side of the pickleball courts there, or the people who are waiting their turns might be a nice, you know, a plus. Again,
Now, did you look at prices for the metal ones? You sent us ones.
well,
for the
from what I
ones
had it,
at the front.
yeah, I was just looking at benches in general, and it could go from $800 to $1,500 a bench. That was the price range I was thinking of.
Yeah.
I've seen 6-foot steel benches for $998 from the one company. I would guess by this week I'll have some other prices that will come in. And then a table, picnic table with benches that would have a space at the end, that would be ADA compliant so that a wheelchair could pull up the end. Those are anywhere from $1,250 to $5,000. So again, I don't know if that's we're
So,
already gonna have a lot of money in there. So I'm just was wondering if maybe we suggest 2 benches at this point, and then that's listed as things that you might want to think about in the future. You know, here are some prices, here's what we looked at, but where do we start to say?
I would agree with that. I think in the layout that we're currently sitting with, we would want to see where people naturally try and congregate before you decide on a picnic table in this layout, because I feel like it would be a hard thing to guess since this is going to be a whole new kind of layout as to where somebody may be interested in sitting at a table, sitting.
Exactly.
I think the benches is probably a good idea to put a couple. I want to, I like that you're saying metal benches and things like that, because anything with the wood, we've seen at the other parks how that is or isn't able to be maintained as easily. And so something that's either metal or specialty wood or whatever the case is, that's not going to get covered in the light.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it makes sense when we go to do this practice of putting it all together to put in 2 benches. And then as we need to, it's maybe a recommendation for the future of interests or whatever, if it doesn't fit into the overall, but I would defer to others too.
Yeah, it might be something, once we get this all done, being optimistic, and it's used, then it's also a possibility that you might be able to get some things donated.
Yes.
Sponsor.
Benches are, an $800 bench is an easy, easier donation than a pickleball court, 100,
Right, yeah.
having the funds to do. And not saying that $800, to be clear, I'm not saying $800 is minimal, not money for people, but having a few different families chip in. I don't want to minimize that $800 is a lot of people.
And the other question was, what about a bike rack? We talked about a bike rack, and I think that's probably something we would want to have, but I don't know if that, again, just say there's another future, have prices included and have that on if we had another. I don't know.
It would be good to have a price for a bike rack.
Yeah.
Because we want people to bike.
Right.
Yeah.
So kids might be able to bike over there.
You should just check with P. He's got an extra one laying out back.
Ah, okay.
Just a thought.
I'm thinking
never
that's
know what
something
they've
that
got
could
out
go
there.
Over in the same space as the water fountain is, what I'm thinking right here by the entrance. If
Yeah,
if we
somewhere
did
close to the end.
Where you come in and you leave your bike.
Yes.
Biking all over the-
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'll just get a firm price for.
Yep.
Denise was getting prices from 2 contractors for the parking lot. And I don't know that she's gotten them. And then I have Eric Ladensack also. He was going to give me a price for the
Okay.
parking lot. I haven't heard anything
Yeah.
from him yet.
Okay.
Those are the pieces?
I think those are all of our pieces of Brown's Court itself, unless anybody had anything further. What we'll plan on doing is our next meeting next week. Hopefully we'll have a better idea of the survey to more talk about this. And we can then but, do more of a budget, I'll have more of
Yeah.
the numbers all put together. So if I reach
Mhm.
out to you, it's gonna be
Yeah, 'cause
probably
I-
doing that this weekend and.
I was trying to figure out how many cedar trees
Yeah,
that you might want, and it all depends on where you want to put them.
yeah. So the cedar tree, I do think we price it out to go here and here. And I don't know, thoughts about over here. I know that got brought out at a previous meeting.
I'd have to go look at that again.
Okay.
And it depends on where the survey owns. too,
Right, that's
Yeah,
true.
we don't know where the,
I think
Where
the ideal for the bocce court was to have it close to a ravine, so in case there were drainage.
Mhm.
Is there a fire hydrant? Near?
No,
There must be, so.
the fire
Down it-
hydrants
down
on
it.
Brown's Court at Kristen's house.
Is there one close to the field? I don't.
There's
know where
none in the
Kristen-
ball field that I'm aware of.
Not
remember
near,
seeing
okay.
I
I was
don't
just
think
curious. I know
so.
we've tapped into the hydrants before to clean off.
Right, it's on
Maybe so.
that corner house there.
I don't see anything, but doesn't mean it's not
One of
there.
those big wrenches.
You're gonna
When you
put
know
stop
people-
signs up or what?
It's all about who you know.
Say that again?
Are we talking about traffic lights and
No.
stop signs?
No.
You'd have a stop sign, well, you shouldn't have, but you could put a stop sign leaving the parking lot.
Yeah.
Well, there should be a stop.
Yeah.
Okay, that is all of the pieces, I would say for now that we have from court, unless there's anything anybody else wants to talk about with it, and then the next piece would be getting into volunteer green, unless,
so we'll wait and really kind of talk about the plan and how to present to public, how to get, and maybe we'll be talking about that with volunteer screen and the other part also, so, yeah. Okay.
so with volunteers green, like I mentioned before, we're sort of waiting on the survey to have a better idea. Sherry says resin material may be an option for benches.
Oh, like the
Yeah.
new Hollywood.
Thanks, Sherry. Then, so yeah, with the survey, I think a lot of our plan at Volunteers Green sort of hinges on whether we have the potential to move the playground up to
Yeah.
say, the band shell space. So,
If we can't, then what?
Yeah.
Oh,
mhm.
gee. Oh, gee. Only if you do rights of whatever, that you get people's land along Brown's Trace to go back how many feet?
No, there was
No.
even, no,
We're not thinking
No.
that. Where,
No.
do you cite a playground
Backward.
that's somewhat in town or
back
was it,
where
yeah,
the playground is? Do you
yeah, would we
spend
do that?
What do you do?
Okay,
Mhm.
I just want to make sure. They're all, they're on the same page.
So,
I have just a little update, a little comment about the playground is I'm going to be doing, this is just not as part of this committee, just me. Working with some kids from the Mansfield Co-op who actually use the playground on a regular basis. And I'm not sure what the project will be. It will, whatever it involves, whether they're gonna look at 3 designs and make some comments about what they would like to see, whether they want to learn. I said, well, I'm starting to know a little bit about floodplains. If you want to just, learn, do they just want to learn about how you measure? So somehow, we're gonna do something, but I do bone builders and they're recess. They come out for recess every day out of the building. And I finally thought one day, well, I know a couple of those kids and maybe they'd like to, learn more. And they were so excited because they wanted to know right away. This was while the construction was being rebuilt, are you gonna put a new slide there? Is this gonna go there? So even if it's a 2-hour project, that it just be getting some kids' input onto what
that's great.
they might like on the playground.
So this was great.
So Pete suggested, this was at the last meeting that you were in, yep, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Let's summarize, hold on.
That's right.
Let's summarize. I apologize.
No,
So at the last meeting, we had Pete come and he had some plans or some ideas on what he thought. He gave us some numbers on the amount that it cost the town how many hours it's cost the town to keep redoing the playground space down there each time it floods. Don't quote me on my number, but it was a lot.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, wow. I think the number that pops into my mind was like $10,000 each time. or
Yeah, it was just
something like that.
even $4,000 of just the wood fiber.
Yeah.
Right, not
To
the
redo
wood
the
that time,
wood
but-
base and
yeah.
things like that. So his suggestion was that if that bandshell space is out of the floodplain and there's question marks as to whether it is or is not based on the elevation, and that's what Chris Haggerty is determining. If
Mhm.
it is, then you could use that space as being out of the floodplain. You could, his suggestion, this is all his
Yeah.
suggestion to us,
Mhm.
is that you could tear down the bandshell, build the playground there on its spot, and over, if you're looking, we'll say, towards the bridge.
Yep.
Up the hill from the parking lot. The playground would be over on the right, and you could build a pavilion with bathrooms over to the left with some type of blockage.
There were all those crabapple trees
Right.
on that
You
little
have
garden.
to
Yep.
take away all the crabapple
Right.
trees. I've already talked to the Ladensack family. And all they would want was the rock that, the plaque that needs to be replaced on that mentions, their brother. And they would like that moved up to where their mom lives. Yeah, but they have no concern, because a lot of what we planted 40 years ago is in not good shape or has disappeared. So, they would be happy if we did something else. Whether there's room to site a pavilion, small pavilion, restroom facility up there and still have the playground.
Right.
We would, once we.
These rough estimates were that this could, but again, it would take more than just.
And then I've had,
Confirm that.
I've been throwing the idea out to everyone I know because I wanna see whether people have a great love for the band shell.
Mhm.
And I'm not finding that people would miss the band shell. What, one comment was, I'm fine getting rid of the band shell, but you would need, a fence to keep the kids
Mhm.
in the playground.
In the playground,
the
away from the
playground.
river, away from the roads. Yeah.
And then the other concern I heard was, if you're having a concert and kids are playing at the playground, will you be able to hear whatever is happening? We could work on that with the sound system, but but it's, to me, it's, can we fit it and have it look nice? And I did send, an email to John Lynn, and I just said, is this drawing up a design for some, assuming we were able to go through all the hoops and get permission, is this something that a company like yours would do?
Mhm.
Draw up a design for that plateau, so it would look nice.
Mhm.
And, and I said for pay, because I think we have to be careful. And we cannot use, well, if they're a
Right.
professional, you have to be careful about how much you ask them to do. And he said that he had talked to Ben Bush, and they would be excited. We'd have to go out to other companies too if we could do that, but they would be excited about trying to create a nice looking area up there with a restroom, pavilion restroom, and a place for the playground and some
That'd be
shrubs,
wonderful. If it was up. What does our flood manager say about this?
It all depends on that survey.
It all depends on the survey.
And there's a memo that you
Okay.
probably haven't had a chance to read that has like
3 pages, yeah.
A, B, and C.
I
from
did read
him
this.
Yeah,
about-
that's what he was
from
talking-
Tyler.
Okay.
About what?
Go ahead, Jay.
I just have a question about,
Sure.
are we talking about potentially getting rid of the band shell and
Yeah.
leaving no performing space?
No, we would build Pete's idea and it would be to build a pavilion more toward Bridge Street that would face
Yes,
in.
that was
And
a
that
full
would
roof.
be the performance space and you would have a small restroom facility.
I just don't want to kill off the roof. And
No.
the abandoned for now.
No, I don't
We
either.
want to create a new space.
And they are the ones that have been talking about how it's only a 50% roof and they get wet, the design, so, she's,
There's no
so,
ADA compliance.
yeah,
There's no.
yeah.
Well,
And how much
It's a terrible space.
well, and
prices?
we are sort of still going through the engineering study about the beams of the band shell and what it would take to fix the floor and put drainage in and possibly make it ADA compliant. So that could be something, a point for getting rid of the band shell.
Right.
Is
much
that,
Getting more to profit up.
yeah,
If you would on a pavilion, I think.
Right.
yeah. So, it just, when we get that survey that tells us
Right.
what the elevations are, well,
Whether that-
then it's up to the select board to hopefully immediately apply for this letter of map amendment, which,
Yeah, but speaking of the person who's on the select board for now, I hate seeing us just throwing bad money after bad money every time there's a flood. We have to wreck that playground. To say nothing of the damage it did to the baseball field.
Mhm.
The July flood just, you guys saw it. It's just, I don't like the idea of investing money to put more stuff down there. Anything we can move time to, we should.
well, I will bring up the path that we've been talking about, and Tyler is saying we probably couldn't put a paved path around the grass area, which is, people are looking for a path that they can put wheelchairs and strollers on, and Tyler is not convinced that we could put a paved path there. But Pete thinks that a paved path would survive a flood versus, but we are a sure path, but it would be close to 3/4 of a mile. And occasionally somebody will say, well, why don't you put it up at Brown's Court? Well, what did,
It's 0.3 miles around the whole perimeter of the
and
actual
we're
home.
using up the perimeter of Brown's Court.
Right.
So, I know there are some people that do not want to see a path down at the park, but that would be something that I think we could still do. And there may be some maintenance over time, but it wouldn't be a $200,000 playground that's.
Mhm. Mark? Go ahead.
Hey there. So and I know I haven't, which I'm regretting right now myself, but has anyone asked Taylor what it would take for that flood zone language to allow a perimeter path and more flexibility in what we're trying to do? Because I mean, he's just reading zoning regulations that were written much stricter than FEMA guidelines. And so,
That's why I asked you in Virginia. You being on the planning commission, having written some of those regulations, that it might be up better if you in Virginia looked at them to see if there was some minor modifications that could be made.
well, some might be able to interpret the zoning regulations as they are now as allowing that kind of flexibility. But Tyler's interpreting this differently, or strictly, I should say. And so what is it that he needs to see that would facilitate that kind of change? Because I look at it, and I read him recently, long time ago, a few weeks ago. And it didn't seem like it was as strict as the interpretation. I understand his idea about expanding pre-existing structures and using that to interpret, okay, a baseball field is a pre-existing structure, and therefore we could, totally redo the baseball field and put in deeper and better dugouts and that kind of work. He sees all that as being visible, but then in other places he's like, oh no, that's a red line I can't cross, because a path becomes a structure and there was no pre-existing paved path to start with. So we'd be putting in a new path, and therefore I can't accept that. I guess somebody needs to sit down with what our goals are for this park and what zoning regulations need to be tweaked for his interpretation to allow them.
I think that's something that you could do better than I could do.
Yeah, you're probably right. I was just hoping to pass the buck. All right. I will reach out to him and in coordination with Virginia and see if we can't come up with something more specific and see if it's something that the commission and the town overall would be amenable to. All right, thank you.
You have another, John?
John Cart.
Hi, I'm gonna say the same thing again, as I did last time, but Mark Falzo, if, it'd be great if you would also, connect with DEC, the river engineer and the river ecologist, because, a path, particularly on the river side of perimeter, is gonna lead to more erosion, and we just lost a lot of riverbank, in December. In addition to the riverbank we lost in July, a path is going to get in the way of regrowing trees that are going to be the only thing that's going to keep the rest of Volunteer Screen there.
I'm sorry, but I thought the path was going to be on the inside of all of those trees, because I agree with you, John, that putting something through the trees or anywhere close to the riverbanks is a bad idea. But I thought the discussion was that this path would go inside the new plantings that you spearheaded, by the way. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, sorry, it seems like that's the case, but we just lost, well, I'll say I was hoping those new trees had another good 10 years to grow before they became the actual riverbank. But there were a few places where we're down to barely, not even one old tree before we get to the new one. So that bank is going to keep getting eroded, and we're going to need more trees before, that path needs to be further from the riverbank than at least the drawing that I saw presented, so a few months ago. If we want the park to be if we want Volunteer Screen to be something like it is today in 10 years, that it's not going to be a smart thing to put a path that close to the river.
So
I'm happy to walk out there with you and show you what I'm talking about, if that would help.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful. And maybe we can catch up after outside of this meeting to do. But is there anything in your expertise that would allow us to stabilize this park so that we don't lose it to a switchback and all of a sudden it kick in like it did down the road on 117, where it pretty much wiped out an entire farm field in a matter of 2 years? We're looking at that sort of thing, and we have this money that is designed to support our town recreation. Wouldn't saving the actual space where the recreating occur be an investment?
Yeah. Well, again, that would be something that would be helpful to bring in some of the river specialists. Maybe we could encourage the people across Bridge Street from the park to fill in that field with some more trees. That would help slow down the speed of the water when it hits Volunteer Screen. So there's less of an erosive force. But any clearing you do, whether it's a path or pavement, is going to allow the water to speed up, which increases the rate of erosion. It's a bit, the path, the sure-pack path might survive, but everything around it will erode if there's no trees holding things in place.
I think it's a discussion to do aside from where we are tonight.
Happy to do that. And as much as you guys would like, I would also like a path that's easy to walk on. It gets harder for me to walk. I'm just not sure the Volunteer Screen is the place for it.
Okay. John Lynn, you have your hand up?
Sure. back to the backup plan, if that plateau isn't out of the volunteers green, or isn't out of the floodway, my understanding is that we already kind of have the developed area where the playground is, and we can relocate that developed area to elsewhere on the same piece of property. Even if the plateau isn't out of the floodway, it seems like, I mean, in my 40-something years living here, it's never flooded. We could at least move the playground up there, whether or not the state says it's out of the 100-year floodway. You know, if we're going to redevelop it, having it up there, I think was a great idea by Pete. And if we have to redo the band shell, we could use that same footprint for a pavilion. It would be really small to do bathrooms and a pavilion, a band shell of sorts, but it would be a start.
I guess your interpretation, I like it, but I was thinking we had to put, if we were to put a playground in the floodway or whatever, it had to be in the same spot, but you're thinking that as long as we kept the same dimensions, we could move it up.
I think so. That'd certainly be worth checking with Tyler about, but that's my understanding. I can't imagine the state would have an issue with that, being that you'd be making a bad situation better. But he's the flood dude.
Yep. I will check. Good thought, John. Thank you.
Sure.
Because I know the only other place that when we talked about this last meeting that was suggested as a possibility was over there behind the library, but I think that wasn't feasible. I think so I think that we were sort of left with these other two options.
Yeah, the library uses that space for their programs.
Yeah. And that'd be outside of really our allowance.
Yeah, and then there was also the discuss that's a major parking lot and yeah, I think that could be plan F, not A, B, C, D, E first.
So my computer keeps wanting to not be sharing the agenda, but it's pretty much talking about this stuff briefly. So I think that we have a lot hinging on determining what Chris Haggerty's survey says and talking to Tyler about what that means. You know, I think we've put sort of Jeannie, you on hold on meeting with the reps and things like that until we have a better idea of where and what the space is going to be. Because we don't want to have them come and then have it be a whole different space, a whole different.
Can you sort of, from what you know, when talking to people, come up with, in your mind, which playground you would want to go with?
Now I'd want to have some more input about the design, but what I will tell you is that Justin Mansfield has worked with Pete Gosselin. He's maintained that playground helped Pete maintain that playground for the last 20 years. He came up and walked with Pete around there to determine whether a playground could even go up there. I mean, he's just somebody that has a relationship with this playground already. So, but again, that's,
I just wondered
I think
if
the
it'd be worth
space
time help us move ahead anyway, if we sort of still kind of worked on figuring out what playground we would want. Not exactly sure where it would go, but
whether we could still pick a design without.
Pull up your images. I had a question on one of them. One of them looks like, and I was trying to recall which one it was. It looks like it has, like covers over it. Well, let me see if I can figure it out.
See,
You
I
know
know
what
that
I'm
each one of them, I would already have
Because I'm like, I don't think that
right, there are already some
not
tweaks that
the
people-
miracle one.
Yeah.
Hold that one up. I can share that if that's helpful, just as a quick reference. Let's see if it'll let me share.
I mean, I have lots of comments from different people about each of the three structures. I could look at that. I just don't have any of that with me or the designs right now. Each one of them has some pluses, there are some, one of them doesn't have the excavation and the planning, built in. I didn't even want to ask, I just sent them a message to tell them we're all on hold right now until we decide, because I had some suggestions to each one of them before they would present us, change this,
They
do
would
this, do
definitely-
this. But I wouldn't want them to put any more time and energy into that. If we, don't know where it will be. Because maybe some of that wouldn't have to be tweaked. And I'm really reevaluating or thinking a lot about,
This one, I'll share.
the ADA accessibility. Those long ramps, I mean, this was exactly the design I asked for, but when you look at the one playground that has a lot of ramps going on, and then that's actually
This is
Justin's
one of the
playground. Yeah, that is
These
one
were
from-
these like little,
I think they're sunshades
Okay.
and those posts. Yeah, they could have them and not have them. That is,
those are
that's the land shapes one. That is that's the group that built the original structure.
okay.
So that's why I'd asked them.
And then I pulled up, where did it go? One of the other ones. That one.
Yeah, O'Brien, that's O'Brien. Then it's
The other one I had quickly accessible. The next one.
if one says from
Right here.
Perry, there you go. That's the Pentinelli one. And that's,
the two I found.
Justin is the one that has worked, here with the town already. I know he's built some of the playgrounds.
This is the one you were talking about though with the
Yeah,
long ramp.
but the ramps, so I have been thinking about this because for every 1 inch of elevation, you have to have 10 feet of ramp. And so that does have a lot of ramp. What's the play value of that? It's kids running up and down on a ramp. You can have things all around the playground that makes it accessible to all, that doesn't have to be as many ramps. And I also think that ramp structure might have been a little bit bigger than the playground area that we had, although he had that coming from the sidewalk, the first ramp.
Yep.
So ramps are really a lot of money. And I think the other playground that had a lot more climbing structures around it would be accessible to all people from around the outside.
This one here,
Actually,
the
the
third one.
Compom one, the really expensive
Let me go see
one.
if I can.
I mean,
Those
as
are the
far as
two
the
I found.
design itself. So, but we could certainly talk about that more, and I could think about, I just sort of put the playground on hold. Thinking
Wow.
that maybe by next week we would have a better idea.
Unfortunately, can't find that one very well.
Yeah.
I don't
Well, it
remember.
had, the other guy,
remember if
he
you
had
emailed about
presented
it?
6 different designs to us. And they were, from quite elaborate to, it would be a showstopper, and it would be definitely a destination playground. But I'm not sure that, he's also the same person that when Tess got some quotes for the ports, that he didn't include everything we were asking him about.
Yeah.
It just seemed,
It's a Cadillac.
yeah, and not always, the rep wasn't always giving us what we had asked for. So, I mean, I could probably do an elimination of one if although his design was great. So,
So
my guess is anyhow, so I would bet that Justin, Mansfield would get recommendations from Pete, from, the principal at Richmond Elementary School, probably from, Jeff Forward has worked with him on some playgrounds as a
is he
facility.
the one that also did Craig the King? that I
He
said?
did,
Okay.
yeah, that same company. So it's a local company, and the other two are from out of state.
And I know they very much, they got all the work done in like a week so that then they could have it, very quickly turn around because the kids had no place. They were great to work with from my recollection.
And one of the questions I can also tell you, when I asked Justin about, community help and community volunteers, he goes, "Oh, I love volunteer builds." And the other people were
Like, no, thank you.
that's really, that would be liability problems. And so that's also an advantage for volunteers green.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I think, in my opinion, when we go to the select board with something like this, we bring them what we think is the best.
Yeah.
They're gonna have to go out for RFP, do their due diligence. But we're bringing them the plan as it sits that we think is based on input, based on all of the research we've done, the best option. And so I appreciate
exactly.
you.
And the other thing with the playground, having the grants, part of the grant, there was an extra $10,000 in just for community engagement and getting input from the community, regarding some designs. And we could have it narrowed down to a contractor who presents 3 or 4 designs versus
Mhm.
3 contractors. If we wanted to think about that.
In order to get the input.
Yeah, yeah, but there was definitely that's a big part, is getting feedback on the design. And
Yep.
So I started with just the 10 kids from Mansfield Co-op.
Yeah.
It's a good place.
Yeah. So that's sort of where we're at in terms of volunteers green.
Yep.
I don't know that we have a whole lot that we can kind of move forward with it until we know, are we completely changing the layout, or are we back to the drawing board with that? I think we have more questions right now than answers when it sits with volunteers green. The next item is sort of, I put on the agenda Tyler's memo. We've referred to it and things like that. I don't think we need to in any way go through that in detail, but just give an opportunity for us to kind of talk about it if we felt like we needed to. I think we have more questions to bring back to him in terms of this idea that John presented with the footprint. Then the next item is summary of action items and moving ahead. I don't know that, other than the few things we've now talked about, that we have sitting action items. I'd say, like I mentioned before, for the next meeting, my hope would be to have kind of a rough budgeting for us to start looking at. And like we kind of have mentioned, I'm gonna have it set up that it breaks out the different parks. It shows the multiple quotes, but they're not all taken into account. They're just other quotes. And so with your advice on this, I would put that one, the one with Justin's group, as the main one, and then the other 2 for now as the alternatives. Again, none of this is anyway set in stone. It's a moving document, so we're ready to present it. But for us to start putting the numbers together as a whole and how much we're talking it.
Yeah.
And lastly, we don't have on the agenda, but we have as an open kind of item, is not forgetting Round Church Park in all of this. It just has all of itself kind of tied up for the moment until we are ready to start finalizing and presenting for that.
I think what I need to know is, what else do I need to supply to this?
I don't know that.
I don't think you have to
No.
do anything.
I think that you provide, what I'll do is I'll start putting that together. I'll make sure I've gotten all the numbers that I've heard you reference to make sure that they're all accurate. And it may not be that the budget itself, when I come in on Tuesday, is all tied up. You can have your numbers that you've had and you can correct me at that, and that'll be a main agenda item, as I would say, is talking about the numbers of this all, if that works for everybody. So you can correct me if I've got your numbers wrong, but I'm going to be going back to, and I have all the documents that you guys have sent me. So if you've sent me something, it will be reflected, hopefully, if I don't miss any emails and all of the like, but that's my goal.
So we need to, like, parking lot, we need to get their numbers. of
If
which
we don't,
they
yeah,
have
we don't have no, then I'll put a placeholder of all the pieces
But,
like we're talking about. But ideally, and again, this doesn't have to be an end all be all. We're not at like wrap it all up and tie it with a bow yet, but it gives us a starting place to start filling in all the gaps. And so if we don't have them for Tuesday's meeting and they're not reflected, it's going to be evident. It's going to be a line item that has no numbers yet, that kind of thing. I think it's trying to get it to closer to being able to present this, and this is the numbers piece. And then we look at the display and the design and how that looks too, when we present.
Should I be looking at bocce court costs? Because I'm kind of at a standstill on that, but
We do
along
need
the-
those numbers.
Just the material, right, is what we decided, because the rest of it we had decided would be potentially volunteer based. I believe that's what we discussed when
Well,
we
we
met with.
talked about having it done by volunteers. With that, my original thought is that we were going to have like a much smaller kind of court. When Mark was talking, I think when he said, you know, people will come, and I think both Tanner as well as Lewis said, if you build it, they will come. Well, I think that's in the context of a much longer court, and everything that I have read has said these 60-foot long ones tend to be backyard kind of courts. So I just don't know, like, do you build a small one just to accommodate a few people? Do you go bigger so that you can accommodate 8 people? I just don't know. From everything that I've read, that they're saying you get beyond the 60 feet, it's more of a job for a professional. So even before that discussion about volunteers came up, I already contacted through, you know, you fill out the forms online, and I contacted Maple Tree, which is in Colchester, and it's one that was involved with some of the building of the ones at Oak Ledge. And I didn't hear anything from them, and we got into the discussion about volunteers. And just within the last week or so, I got a note from him saying, "I'm so sorry, your request just got lost in the shuffle. And are you still interested?" And Lewis did come up to her house this weekend, and he basically said a 20 by 84 would be ideal. He had some other ideas. He's thinking it would be a good idea to have the outside be concrete, a lining inside of it to either be wood or that plasticized synthetic wood, I guess is what it's called. I know that the top layer that they use, there's a stuff called Hard True, or if you go through Hattica's, it goes under another brand name. I did contact Hattica's, and until they know the size and the location, they didn't volunteer to give a price. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I just don't know what to pursue.
Well, I think we need a number of
I think
some
we-
sort.
yeah.
Pardon?
We need a number
need a
of some
number.
Yeah.
sort.
So
Even if it's higher,
Yeah,
I'd rather get a professional number,
yeah,
Okay,
and then we can back off and
Mhm.
say,
okay, then I'll pursue that.
yeah.
And also the other question is, these people are from Colchester, I believe. Does anybody know of somebody like right in Richmond? Any patio builders? That sort of thing.
no.
Okay, I'll look into some more and see.
I know the one that we used when I lived out in Essex now. He's retired. Did a very nice job.
Okay, I'll pursue some professional builders.
Yeah, because yeah, we'll need that. And so that's the pieces that like would be great to have for that. But it also then just, if we aren't able to get it for that Tuesday meeting, it gives us okay, for that next one, we really need to start tying up the loose ends sort of situation. You know, we only have a week before our next meeting, so I don't expect us all to like get all these things done. Like that's a lot. But it starts being able to see in sort of a numerical value how this stuff adds up, which is what we referred to earlier in this meeting.
Lewis did volunteer to draw up a design that I could submit. But
Because the one that I was just pulling up this out of curiosity is, this one here that's on the image is a 13 by 87. So I assume a 20 by 84 is a double.
yes.
So
And I believe he said you could do
This is
something like
just for
20 by 76
your
or 20 by 78. Yeah.
mind's eye on how much space that takes if your 84 is about that much length.
Oh.
Okay. That is sort of we've kind of jumped around to the assignments and next steps and that kind of thing. Is there any other updates that anybody feels that they want to give or any additional, John has a name for you. I'll bring it up so that it's larger. That piece,
Can you see that?
a print of Livingstone Landscapes and Design is here in Richmond. Can you just,
Plus, when you're headed up the road and the fancy red design. On the
thanks, John.
corner.
It's at the bottom of Heinsberg.
Yeah.
Where it starts.
Oh, right
Thank
there.
you.
That's him.
I never knew the name.
That's.
So opening up for any,
I think we ought to write a brief summary for the Front Porch Forum that talks about the 3 parks, things that we're exploring without any controversial statement.
yeah.
And then at the end of it, say, we're welcome in.
Yeah.
If you have any thoughts, any input.
Our meetings are open to the public.
And I also think that we would want to find the links, like Jesse, when you were saying, Jesse, right? Links to, if you want to look at our previous meetings or minutes, here's where you can find those. Something without opening us up to.
I can
Yeah.
try and do something and then.
Yeah, have us all.
Yeah.
Would that question about open meeting rules, if we're posting a Front Porch Forum and somebody provides it, I know how we've done it and how we've understood it to be, is we're able to provide information to each other,
Right.
but we can't comment back and forth.
Oh, right.
So with that, is it something that you could do for our next meeting and we could review as a committee
next-
at our meeting, and I'll put it as an agenda item? We could then post it, then we could be saying our next meeting is on, whatever the date was, we decided at the beginning of this meeting,
It's the 30th.
and it would be posted quite subsequently to
Sure.
us holding our meeting. Does that sound fair to everybody to make sure we maintain proper?
Yes, and the other, I was, getting some clarification about this open meetings and thinking that, like Fran, I think you could send it out to us to review. We just can't go
Comment
back and forth and say anything.
Right, we can
And that was
pre-look
the
at it
same,
and have our,
something that we
Have
sent out
your comments ready to
before.
Bring it.
Yes,
Yeah.
when we have to remind each other to not comment, if we send something out to say, here's what I worked on, you don't have those discussions about it on.
Right.
So
which is why I send my agenda.
comment. Wait.
Yeah,
Save your
save your
comments.
comments for the
Save your
meeting, or like
comments.
Fran said, we'll put that on the next agenda.
Which is
So
why
that we
I
don't-
say when I send the agendas,
Yes.
email them directly to me.
Yes, yes, because I think that's important for us to just about it. Know about and be aware of.
So Fran, you're gonna draft that.
Yep.
To be reviewed at our next meeting. And I'm happy to post that if after.
Okay.
But, so Fran will draft it and then we'll review it at the next meeting. Remember to put it on the agenda. That's all I had on our agenda. Anybody has anything else, or we can call the meeting to a close.
I move we adjourn.
I second it.
30 seconds, there you go.
Sure.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
But yeah,
None, meeting is ended.
I'm so used to it.
Great meeting, guys. Thank you very much. Have a good night, and hopefully I'll have some information for you regarding zoning next time we
Aye.
talk.